Hey everybody, JR from JR's Cars. Today, I'm going to show you how to change and check the transmission fluid on a 2013 Ford Escape, so stay tuned. Alright, so like I said, I'm going to show you how to change the transmission fluid, but I really want to show you how to check the transmission fluid as well, because the engineers who created this transmission, they must have been dipsticks themselves because they neglected to put one on the transmission so you can actually check the fluid. So there's two flaws with the transmission. One is that there's no dipstick to check the transmission fluid, so it's a little more involved. And the other downfall of the transmission is that it has a non-serviceable filter. So what does that mean? Typically on transmissions, you would have a pan that you would drop. There would be a filter in there. You can replace it as part of your normal maintenance. With this transmission, it's actually encased in between the two ends of the transmission. It's right in the middle of the transmission. And in order for you to change the filter, you would have to take the entire transmission apart. You'd have to take it out, you'd have to separate the two halves of the transmission, and not everybody's going to do that. So Ford recommends a 30,000 mile oil change interval for the transmission services. A lot of people don't do them, so I'm kind of a little leery about what I'm going to find in here. So let's get at this, and I'll show you how it's done. Okay, so first thing you want to do is you want to get the car up in the air. Now there is a plastic pan that's on the bottom of the engine here. I've already removed it. It basically is just held in with these screws here. They're all around the perimeter. They attach to, if you look here, you'll see that there's also some screws that are here that are attached to the inner fender wells. Get that out of the way, and then you can get to the transmission. And I'll show you where the drain is and where there's a screw that you would undo to see to check where the top end of the fluid is, kind of like on a differential of an old car. So I'll show you that now. Okay, here we are underneath the driver's side of the car here, and this is your transmission. This here is your drain plug. So if you look underneath the car, you see that there's this plug right here. This is a 7/16. This is the drain, so we'll end up opening this up and let the fluid all drain out. All right, so if you look in the middle of your screen right there, you're going to see right next to the axle, there's that nut that's right there. That is the that's where you're going to see if the fluid is level. If you open that up and fluid comes out, it means that it's a little bit over full, but you have to have the transmission running in order to check that, and it has to be on level ground. So what we'll do is we'll crack that open so it vents. We will come back down here. We'll open this back up, and we'll drain this out, and then we'll see what kind of fluid comes out of this thing. So actually, before we get to draining, what we want to make sure is, number one, that top bolt is going to come out, so you can make sure that you can check the fluid level. But you're going to have to fill it from up top here, right? So if you look, this is your engine, this is your air box. Right down in here, there is your vent cap. And what you're going to do is you're going to pull this out. You have to make sure that you pull this out. Pull it straight up. It'll come right out. And then this is where you're going to be filling the transmission from with the fluid. So let's get back underneath the car and let's get the old fluid out first. All right, I already have this loose. Just double check. Yep. So let's go ahead, and I got my pan here ready to go. So let's pull this and see what it looks like. Huh. Yeah, nothing really red about that. My bet is this transmission probably wasn't serviced, or wasn't serviced well. But we'll let this drain out, and then we'll get to filling it, and I'll show you how that's done. Okay, so like I showed you before, while that's draining out, what we're going to do is we're going to go in here, we're going to pull this vent here. So like I said before, this here is going to be where you're filling the transmission from, but this is also the vent for the transmission too. So as you know, it builds up pressure inside of it, it needs to vent some of the air out of it as well. So we just need to move some of these things out of the way, which could be a little consuming with one hand. You'll go down here, you'll pull this out. So let's see if we can actually do this on camera. And there we go. You just have to be careful when pulling it out so you don't drop it out, right? So now we have the vent out. I'll show you that in a second. But this is what you have. It's basically just a little tube here that goes into the transmission. You can see that it's rubber. When we go to fill the transmission up, we're going to put a funnel down this, and we'll end up filling it from here. But this is what that vent looks like. See if I can kind of shade you here. That's what that vent looks like. It's barbed, right? So you can kind of see the ribs on here. So when you pull it out, you'll feel those ribs, you know, kind of grinding a little bit when they pull out. But that's all that it is. It's a little vent. That piece there. There should be yellow lettering on here. It looks like this was already rubbed off, but you'll pull that out, and then you'll see that you have your vent tube here. So let's let this finish draining out, and then what I want to do is I want to pull it out. I want to pull the fluid out. I want to look at it, and I want to see. Obviously, we can see that it's pretty dark, but I also want to do two things. One, I want to measure the amount that came out of the transmission so I know how much I have to put back into it. And then two, as I put it into another container, I want to take a look and see if there's any like shards of metal or, you know, anything that's in it, some debris that would, you know, make me think that there's something with the transmission that, you know, is starting to fail or not. Okay, so after draining it out, this is one of the reasons why I like to use a separate pan and then just drain it out into another bucket, is just to be able to go through and look at the fluid itself after I drain it out to see if there's any kind of chunks or anything like that in the bottom of the pan here. I ended up draining out about 4.5 quarts, and that's pretty average. It should be about 4.5 quarts of fluid if you're just doing a drain like that. But looking at the pan itself, I don't see anything in here. I mean, the fluid looks terrible. It's just dark and garbage. But I mean, it does have a red hue to it, but it's pretty well dark. But you know, looking through it, I don't see any chunks of anything. I don't see anything that would make me think that there's any kind of problems with the transmission, with the exception of obviously the fluid just kind of being dark like that. But it's more than likely dark because nobody actually did the transmission fluid, and this car's got 74,000 miles on it now, so doesn't surprise me here. But this looks good. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug up the bottom. We're going to start filling the transmission back up. All right, so we're about to put the drain plug back in, but first what I want to do is I want to get a little bit of sealant on these threads, just to make sure that we're not going to end up with any oil leaks down there. So what I did, just go out, get yourself a little bottle of thread sealant. And then what you want to do, just want to get a little dab will do you. Get it, and just put a little bit on the threads. You want to make sure that it's only on the thread, right? So just grab a little bit, put it on there. And then we'll put it around. I'll do that off camera, but we'll do that. We'll get that plug back in, and then we'll get the filling. Okay, and there you see we have the plug back in, and it's all sealed up. So now we can go back to the top, and we can start filling up things. All right, so now we have the funnel in place. You want to, where I showed you before, that hose that we took the cap out of, the vent cap, you want to put your funnel down there, and then you're going to start filling from the top. Do it slowly, so that way the fluid will go down and it doesn't burp. So what fluid are we putting back into the transmission? This is what I'm using, right? So you have to make sure that you're using Mercon LV. This is a fully synthetic transmission fluid, and it is not cheap. These quarts are anywhere between 8 to 10. I've seen, go even more expensive than that, $1 a quart. I ended up finding these on Amazon. Some guy had a sale on these, and they were pretty cheap. They were actually like $5.50 a quart, as opposed to the $9, $10 it would normally cost. So I picked up a few of these, but you have to make sure that you're using the right fluid. Do not use those stupid multi-vehicle fluids or anything like that, because they could cause transmission problems. There's specific additives that are in this transmission fluid for this transmission alone, and you want to make sure that you're using the right fluid. Alrighty, now that we have it filled, I figured 4 quarts was a pretty good starting point, being that I pulled about 4.5 out. I want to make sure that I'm not overfilling it. So what we're going to do now is that bolt right there is going to come out. What we're going to do is we're going to turn the engine on. We're going to get it up to operating temperature. Car is going to be level. It's going to be a little bit of a squeeze to get underneath it. But we'll take that screw out. And then what will happen is when you have the car running, you want to be underneath it. Obviously, keep the car in park, pull the emergency brakes, because you're going to be underneath it. You're going to pull that out. And then what will happen is you'll see transmission fluid coming out of it as it's running. Once it gets to a point where the transmission fluid comes out just as a drip with the engine running, you know that it's going to be a good level. And this is how you check the transmission fluid too. Okay, hopefully that's not too loud there. But we'll crack this loose. Again, that's a 9/16 bolt there. It is warm now, so you have to watch when you're in there. Just watch your hands, it's going to be hot. And make sure you have your pan underneath it. Alright. And we should see some fluid coming out. Possibly. Take it all the way out. No fluid yet. Okay. So let's add a little bit more. All right, cool. Now you see that stream coming out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit more fluid in there. Try and flush it out just a little bit, only because I see that that fluid is still pretty dark. I'm going to put about another half quart in it and let it go through. Okay, at this point you can see that it's starting to slow down a little bit. The flow's slowing down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this just another minute here. And then when it starts just dripping a little bit at a time, I'm going to put the drain plug back in, and then we should be good to go. That means that the transmission's full. Then we can go back up top. We can put the vent back in and call this a done deal. Now the upper plug that you just saw me put back in, you don't need any sealant on. It's got a little rubber gasket on it, so when you put it in, you just have to snug it down, and then you're good to go. So now at this point, we'll take this out, and then we will put our cap back in here. I'm going to do that off camera only because it takes 2 hands, and this is very hot at this point. So I'm going to shut the engine off, let it cool down a little bit, and then I'm going to put that plug in. Okay, so at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive the car for at least about another 10,000 miles just to get the new fluid running through it. And then I want to flush it out one more time, only because the fluid was still pretty dark in it. I want to make sure that I'm getting good, clean fluid in it. You know, unfortunately, it looked like it wasn't really taken care of that well, and especially with these being that they don't have serviceable filters, you really, really need to make sure that you're changing your fluid on time, which I said earlier in the video is every 30,000 miles by recommendation. That way the filter won't clog up and you won't have transmission problems, because these are kind of known for transmission problems, but I would bet that it's more service and maintenance related than anything else. So if you like this video and it helped you out, do me a favor, smash that like button and consider subscribing, because this is a new car to me and I plan on doing an ownership review of it. And then on top of it, I also plan on doing a video from my perspective of buying from the Carvana process, because I purchased this car from Carvana. So stick around and consider subscribing, like I said, because you're going to see more videos coming. And I also have a lot more videos coming from my 69 Monterey. So I hope everybody's staying safe, and I'll catch you in the next video.